normally if people read the book, they're just like, I don't like this book. So why would you want the author to see that? I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. It can turn really nasty really quickly.
Reviews are for readers and are almost always never for authors.
There probably are some positive interactions that come out of opening that kind of Pandora's box, but the problem is you are also, to Alice's point, when it goes sour, it goes really sour. It's sort of like, what is really the ultimate benefit to either side ultimately?
The accepted status quo, reviewers write the reviews specifically for other people who would consume that media. So it's not for authors.
So one of the topics that comes up in the reading community from time to time is the question of whether or not authors belong in reviewer spaces, whether or not it's okay for an author to go into the reviews of their book and comment or like or, potentially subtweet, take a screenshot and then tweet out reviews for their work. So the argument is basically split into two camps. One side is from authors, a lot of new authors that are like, hey, I get a lot out of reviews, or I'd like to be able to clarify some of the things that maybe you've misunderstood in my book, or I really like the interchange, I really like the interplay, I really like the conversation with my readers. And the other camp is largely made up of readers that are like, hey, this space isn't for you, reviews are not for authors, they're for readers. And oh, by the way, every time you guys start splashing around in the reader space, somebody gets their feelings hurt and everybody winds up attacking this reviewer. And that is definitely a thing that happens, and I am not saying in any way that that is okay in any capacity. The conversation can certainly be had over whether or not authors are responsible for the behavior of their fan base, but I just want to make it clear that is not what I am talking about here. I am not talking about authors who step over the line and attack their reviewers or attack reviews about their books. I am not talking about authors who use their massive platform to sick their fan base on reviewers. That is not what this video is about. So I just wanted to be clear about that before we get into it. I certainly have my own opinions and have developed my own opinions. I've been an avid reader off and on my whole life, and I have certainly in that time formed my own opinions on what is and is not okay regarding book reviews. One of those things being, it's not okay to attack people just because they didn't like your book. But I'm new to the author's side of things. I've only been writing for about a year. I haven't published anything yet, but I am looking to do so, sort of towards the end of the year. And being new to the space, I want to make sure that I am as informed as possible. So I consume a lot of content about authors stepping into review spaces and what is and is not okay, and who's okay with it and why they are, and who's not okay with it and why they're not. And one of the things that came up for me last week was a video done by Reads with Rachel. So last week I was in my kitchen making dinner and I had this video on in the background, and I realized that I'm having this out loud argument with this video. I'm arguing with the TV like a mad old woman. And she's saying these things that I'm like, that's not how that works, or at least that's not the motivation behind it. That doesn't make sense. That's not a full picture of what's going on. So rather than continuing to shout at my television like an angry old woman, I thought I'd make a video and open the discussion. And of course, I'll make sure to link the video in its entirety down below. While I have done my best to edit this so that I keep all of Rachel's comments in context and use them in the way that they were intended, I think it's really important that if you want to know what she said and how she said it, that you're able to reference the original material. So in Rachel's video, she said this.
There are unspoken etiquette rules, I feel like, or at least there should be, in the book community. Boundaries that we should all just kind of have a social policy that we accept.
So while I agree that it is absolutely okay to have conversations like this within the community, I think we all need to kind of come to grips with the fact that it's the internet and you can't really police what people do and how they do it. There will always be bad actors, and I think we absolutely should come together, readers and authors, and call out those bad actors when they happen. When a reader oversteps and is really aggressive with an author, readership needs to call that out. When an author oversteps and gets really punchy with a reviewer, that's not okay, and we need to come together as a community and call that out and say, look, That's not okay. You need to stop. But I also think that trying to set up arbitrary rules and restrict what everyone does because a few people don't know how to act in public is overkill. It's treating adults like children, and that's never going to go over well. If one guy murders another guy while you're walking down a street, you make a law against murder. You don't restrict everybody from walking down the street. You don't turn around and say, well, you don't live in this neighborhood, you can't walk on this street. That's just not how public spaces work.
Why do I say that typically authors should stay out of review spaces of their own book? Because reviews are for readers. I simply want them to be educated consumers, and I very specifically tailor my content first and foremost to prioritize readers, aka consumers, not authors, aka the sellers. People have the right to talk about art without having someone come in who was not invited.
Once you enter something into the public discourse, you are, by nature of the fact that it's no longer a private conversation, inviting the public to participate, whether you want them to or not, and whether the content was made for them or not. People consume media that's not meant for them all the time, and once you've put it out there, whether it's a YouTube video, or a blog post, or a review on Amazon or Goodreads, you no longer have control over who consumes it or how, and the fact that you never intended for it to be consumed by the author who wrote the book is secondary to the fact that it is, in fact, public discourse, and therefore is a public discussion.
I think the responsibility here lies with the author to gather more alpha readers, beta readers, and if they need more, then I don't see why the responsibility is on readers. If they would like reviews, then if they're looking for a very particular kind of feedback, if they feel like they need that to progress, they should pay for it.
While I agree with her that authors absolutely should have paid critique partners and alpha readers and beta readers, the difference here is sample size. Anybody who's done any type of software building or software testing will tell you that a handful of QA testers will find most of your big mistakes. But if you really want to make sure that your software is clean and polished, you need to stress test it. And that means you need to throw a few thousand people at it so that they can break things and you can fix them. The same goes for public reviews on books. There is nothing I can pay for pre-publication that is going to give me the same insight that releasing a book out into the world and then watching how tens or hundreds or thousands of people react to it and their emotional response to it. Feedback from beta readers and feedback from the public at large are not the same thing. They're not even remotely comparable.
If a reviewer's content is not tailored for them, I'm just not sure what they can really get out of watching reviews. How much can they really expect from unpaid labor that is not tailored for them? And as a reviewer, like, my delivery, my critiques are worded in a very particular way when I'm sitting here talking about a book to readers. If I'm commissioned to give private beta feedback, that is worded completely differently. So I'm not sure like what of value an author is really going to get out of my review, because I didn't sit down and think like, I need to help this author fix this. There's nothing you can glean from my review of one book that I can't help you better and more specifically pre-publishing.
That's the thing. It's not one or the other. It's both. No matter how honest someone is, once money is exchanged, once you pay for their opinion, it is going to alter the information and the way that they deliver it back to you. For some people, they'll soften it. They don't want to hurt your feelings, so they're going to take the edge off, or, they're going to deliver it in such a way that does not convey the actual emotional response they had. They might say, hey, you might want to change the wording on this, instead of, yo, that's offensive. Likewise, there are people who are going to go the other way. They're going to give you too much detail. They're going to nitpick things because they really genuinely do want to do a good job. And in reality, while they were reading the book, those things didn't bother them, and you get a skewed impression that this is a big deal, and it's really not. Either way, unless the person's review is entirely unsolicited, it's not entirely honest, and although paid reviews are useful, sanitized reactions to things are not conducive to making good art. They're useful in helping with basic construction, sure, but at some point you've got to just throw it out into the world and see what sticks, and then whatever doesn't, you sort of sweep up and reconfigure and find a better way to do it. And you can only do that once you've released something out into the wild and seen what people's pure, unfiltered reaction is.
The craft gets improved in the process of writing. So I feel like post-publication, outside of the context of the story, taking critiques that were, that are like specifically about plot and characters in one story and then applying them to a completely different book also, I just don't see how that's like as helpful as getting good critical pre-publication feedback.
So this is one of those things where I felt like she didn't quite grasp the concepts that were part of the discussion. As an author, the weaknesses that I have in developing character and plot are going to be pretty universal no matter how many books I write, and I'm not going to be able to correct those unless somebody points it out to me or I miraculously gain enough insight to pick out the flaws myself. Sometimes you can get that information from beta readers, and sometimes you can't. So while I agree with her that writing is something you learn by doing, and the more writing you do, the better in theory you get at it, the old adage, practice makes perfect, doesn't really apply here. The reality of the situation is, only perfect practice makes perfect. Improved practice makes improvements, and that's what we're trying to do here. Most writers are just looking to improve. They want to do better in their next book than they did in the previous one. Sometimes you can get that feedback of what you're doing wrong from alpha readers and beta readers and critique partners, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes you need a larger sample size from your target audience to get a good read on whether or not what you're writing is hitting the way that you intend for it to. Because in addition to wanting people to like your books, you're also trying to say something. You're trying to express an idea or convey an emotion, and you need to be able to tell whether or not you're actually doing that effectively. The only way to do that is with a broad sample of your target audience.
This is putting a lot of responsibility on reviewers to do free labor to fix an author's next book when the reviewer did not sign up for that. I think that the responsibility is being put here on reviewers who did not say, yes, I'll take on that responsibility. They just paid for a book, spent their time on it, and now like you want very specific free labor from them. I don't think that that's fair to expect that. I hope that makes sense.
I disagree completely with this statement. I think once you put your opinion out there into the public discourse, what people do with it is up to them. It's not free labor. It's labor that you've already spent, time that you've already spent, that you have voluntarily put out there for people to do with as they please. What authors are doing is capitalizing on labor that's already been spent voluntarily, and I don't have a problem with that. I get that Rachel leans more towards the hammer and sickle side of things, so we're probably never going to agree on this topic, and that's okay. People are allowed to disagree on things. That's part of having an adult conversation.
If you release to the public a review of something, you are entering into a discourse. I am not. I'm telling you right now that I'm not.
Again, I have to disagree. While that may not have been your intention, that is what's happening. Sometimes we have to accept the world as it is, rather than the way that we want it to be.
Like, I'm telling you that if I review a book, that is not an invitation for an author to come tell me their feelings. If I don't want to have a conversation with an author, I won't. Like, it is not an invitation. It's not. It's not a two-way street at all.
So when you're standing in the middle of town square, shouting at the top of your lungs, expecting people to not approach you and be like, hey, let's have a discussion, is a little silly. Some people are okay with opening that conversation and some people aren't. And if you aren't, it's okay to say, look, hard pass, I'm not interested in having a discussion with you on that topic. That's fine. I would also expect that once you set that boundary with someone, that they respect it. What's not okay is expecting every single person in the entire internet to go and look through your personal likes and dislikes on a topic and be able to navigate that perfectly every time. Because all of this conversation is, again, happening in a public forum, it is open for debate. So it's okay for you to set those boundaries, and it's okay for other people to not know that those are your boundaries until you tell them specifically. So I'm in my kitchen cooking dinner, having this debate or discussion with Rachel's video on my own, and then she said this.
We are creating a community where readers talk to readers, and if an author comes in, that compromises the honesty, and then we feel like we can't have those conversations between readers about a piece of media that we paid for anymore.
And that's when I got it. While I still disagree with a lot of Rachel's previous points, I think the fact that reviewers are collectively coming together and saying, look, when you come into these review spaces, we don't feel like we can be honest about your book. And that them feeling like they can't be honest makes them less likely to leave a review, I think that's really important for authors to hear. A lot of books, especially indie books, live and die by reader reviews, and if readers can't feel safe leaving those reviews because they're afraid that they're going to hurt the author's feelings, that is going to be a net detriment to the author community. So thank you, Reads with Rachel, for being so stubborn and so outspoken on this topic that you were able to get through even to somebody like me who's older and set in their ways. So while I still really like the idea of being able to interact with readers, and I'd still like to be able to have those discussions with the people who want to have them, I think it's fair to say I'm going to respect those boundaries and find some third alternative or middle ground. Maybe I'll put a QR code in the back of the book that leads to a Discord or a subreddit or something. Anyway, that's all I've got on this topic. Be sure to check out Rachel's full video that's linked down in the description, and I'll see you next Tuesday. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and of course if you like the way that I present information, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell down below. You can find all of my social media contacts in the description, and of course if you want to keep up with me and the progress I'm making on my current novel, you can do that at effywritesbooks.com. Thank you so much for watching, have an excellent day, and I'll see you next time.